Hello, everyone. Well, thank you for having completed the module. Um, if you did it once, you can do it again. This is one of the catchphrases as we mentioned earlier. That it's good to kind of develop a catchphrase for each of these modules. Do what works for you. For me, it was always coming from my parents. If you did it once, you can do it again. So I just kept the same thing because I heard it so much growing up. If you did it once, you can do it again. Um, and that's the same thing as in the story. That was a true story with my 8 year old. And it was that's just really just what happened and has always happened, and now it gets to the point where it's perfunctory for him whenever he's doing something, and he'll say, "Oh, I can't do this." I'm like, "Excuse me, did you do it already?" "I did it once." "Well, if you did it once, you can do it again." So now it's like, if you do it once, he'll say, "I can do it again," and it becomes that game, but it's really not a game because he's embedding over time in his head that if he does something once, there's no reason why he can't do it again. And even if he hasn't done it once, there's no reason for him to give up from trying to do it, right? So I want to share with you right now 6 reasons why um, kids lack persistence. And if any of this resonates with you and what you have going on in your household with any of your kids, just pay attention and listen. And because there's some things you can do um, to counteract what's taking place. So, for example, the first one is I have my notes here, so I'm going to go back and forth. The first one is fear of failure. A lot of kids give up trying something if they associate not succeeding with failure. And the best, and this is most common, I think this is even with adults. I see a lot of this with many of my clients, particularly any of the children who I coach, where that's a big deal. It's failure, and I tell them what we need to do is cognitively tear down what your definition of failure is, right? Because mine growing up, failure only meant that you hadn't tried in the first place or you hadn't given it your all. But it was never you tried something, gave it your all, didn't succeed as a failure, right? So that never entered my realm of thinking. So with someone who does think that way, it's a matter of, again, cognitively destroying the thought that of what they perceive to be as failure, and letting them know that's not failure. You learn from it, you take notes, you study, you come harder, and there you go. The second one is lack of intrinsic motivation. So this is when kids just basically express a lack of interest, which happens, right? That's why it's a matter of kids trying things out, they don't like it, whatever. But this is when I often say let kids be, leave them alone when it comes to what their interests and their things are, because this is when kids fall into that pitfall of pleasing mom and dad, or pleasing a grandparent, or pleasing an uncle, or dad was a doctor, so I need to be a doctor too, and maybe the interest doesn't lie with that kid with being a doctor, right? So again, persistence. Why persistence? Something that's really not me. They may do it. They may go through the motions, but with a genuine intrinsic interest, it then becomes. Without that, it then becomes arduous and no reason to really continue. Right. The third one is limited role models. This is a big one because often I think and I say, show me a kid who likes persistence, and I'll show you parents who like persistence, right? They need to see. I flaunt any task, any project that I find to be the most difficult. I flaunt it in front of my children for them to see what persistence and grit look like. They need to see it. They need to see it because if they don't see it, if you are if you're preparing a dissertation that's taking you all of your life and energy to do, but your kids never see it, they just see the finished product. They don't think that there was anything difficult that's gone into that. They just think that you popped up with a dissertation that was completed, right? Or if you are struggling at your job, but you come home every day and how was work? Oh, work was great, which is great. Great, show with that positive attitude. But sometimes it's nice to tell your kids work today was difficult. So what are you doing tomorrow, Dad? Going back, right? You know, I remember taking on doing like close to like 70 costumes for the Lion King for my daughter's fifth grade musical, and I True story. I set up at the dining room table. I could have done it in my office. I could have done it in the basement. I could have gone to the attic. Our house is big enough. I could have gone in any room in this house to do it. I chose to do it in at the dining room table for 3 months while my kids just walked in and out and looked and pitched in at times, but they needed to see me do something that was probably one of the most difficult undertakings that I'd ever done, but that I needed to do it and I needed to complete it. And that failure would have only looked like my giving up. So it's important to show them that what persistence look like, right? What it looks like. The next one is instant gratification culture that we live in, and this is the devil. This is all social media, um, which often people say, "Well, it's social media. What can we do? We can do a lot." Like my kids don't get didn't get cell phones until they were 14 years old, going into high school. Let's look. My kid's school is right down the street. It's all of a 2 minute walk. It's one block and a path and a street. Who are you calling? You're calling me. You can go to the office and call me if you need to speak with me. You don't need a phone for it. So, because of the high school further away, they had to walk to school, right? Then they got their cell phones, right? And then they didn't get social media until the age of 16. What kid needs to be 13, 14 years old, 11? Sometimes I hear about 9-year-old kids on social media. Why? Because social media is now parenting our children, is taking the power away from the parent, and they're now parenting our children. And often what we see on social media is not good. So immediate gratification tells a kid, if you can't get this and get the hang of this by day one, leave it alone. Go to something else, right? So kids are diminishing their potential paths to their life's purpose based on social media in subtle ways and sometimes in not so subtle ways of telling them, if you don't get it, just let it go, right? So that's a problem. Take your kids off social media. The next one is overly protective parenting. This is a big one because, again, it goes back to when I say leave your kids alone. Of course, watch over them, protect them, make sure that they're good, give up, establish a little bit of a boundary, but let your kids fail, and then encourage them to get back up. Let them get used to that earlier so that when they do fail as adults or young adults and teens, they're not in freeze mode with, what do I do now? What do you do now? It's easy. You get back up and you continue, right? Um, and then they learn how to solve their own problems. It goes back to our first module, right? Solution problem solving. Kids need that. It's not just a skill that they learn and get rid of. It's a lifelong skill, right? And the final one is underdeveloped executive functioning. Of course, this is something that you just have to monitor. And often what happens, schools are pretty good at monitoring this one as well, too. This is the one that I don't have any major concern over. The one thing that you may have to look, because this is about planning and focus, right? Focus could possibly, or lack of focus could be other issues that you could look into. But planning is a big one. Teaching your kids how to plan. Like I have Mason plan his lunches. My 8-year-old plan his lunches. What are you going to have for lunch tomorrow? Oh, I'm going to have this. I'm going to have this. I'm going to have this. Okay, great. We don't have this in the refrigerator. So what are you going to do? Oh, how about I do this? Start them earlier. Start them earlier with planning their day, planning their lives, planning whatever pertains to them within reason, of course. So, anyway, that's it. Food for thought for that. So I am going to encourage you to go ahead, answer the questions so that you can move on to the next module. The activities, again, super important no matter what degree of corniness that you may think. Again, kids will not see it that way unless you're dealing with teenagers, because everything a parent does for a teenager is corny, right? You can tell them that you're skydiving tomorrow and bungee jumping the next day, and they're like, oh, that's corny, right? But for the most part, again, a kid for the most part just sees activities and engaging and spending time with the parents versus something being corny, right? So again, I can't wait to see you in the next module.